Chapter 1. The Diamond Bracelet. The crystal stemware shattered against the marble floor 3 feet from where I stood, white wine spreading like blood across the restaurant's pristine tiles. I didn't flinch. 6 years of waiting tables in Chicago's most exclusive establishments had taught me that the truly wealthy rarely threw things. It was always their companions who needed to prove something. "You incompetent little bitch," the woman hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the white tablecloth. "Do you have any idea who you're serving?" I kept my expression neutral, my hand steady as I reached for the towel at my waist. "I apologize, ma'am. I'll bring you a fresh. I don't want a fresh anything from you." She rose from her seat, her Valentino dress probably worth more than my annual rent. "I want you fired. Immediately." The man across from her hadn't moved. He sat perfectly still, his dark suit tailored to obscure what I suspected was significant muscle beneath. His face was all sharp angles and cold calculation, the kind of handsome that made smart women cross the street. But it was his eyes that made my pulse skip black as Chicago midnight, fixed on his companion with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Vivienne," he said quietly. Just her name, nothing more. She ignored him, stepping closer to me. I could smell her perfume, something French and suffocating. "You people are all the same, invisible, replaceable. You think because you're pretty you can get away with incompetence?" I hadn't spilled anything. The wine had been perfectly poured, the service impeccable, but I knew better than to argue. I needed this job. My student loans wouldn't pay themselves, and nursing school tuition was bleeding me dry. "I apologize for any inconvenience," I repeated, my voice steady despite the heat crawling up my neck. "Alessandro." Vivienne turned to the man, her voice shifting to something honeyed and petulant. "Aren't you going to do something? Your family owns half this city. One word from you and sit down." The command was soft, almost gentle, but Vivienne dropped into her chair like a puppet with cut strings. I watched, fascinated despite myself, as color drained from her perfectly made-up face. The man Alessandro finally looked at me. His gaze moved from my face down to the name tag pinned to my black vest, then back up with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena Russo, sir." Something flickered in his expression. "Russo." "Yes, sir. You're Italian." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "My grandparents were. From Calabria." His lips curved slightly, though I wouldn't call it a smile. Of course they were. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a money clip thick with bills. He peeled off what looked like $500 bills and set them on the table. "For your trouble, Miss Russo. And for your discretion about this evening." I stared at the money. "Sir, that's not necessary, take it." His voice was still quiet, but there was steel beneath the silk. "And forget you saw us here tonight." Before I could respond, he stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced efficiency. Vivienne scrambled to her feet, shooting me a look of pure venom that promised this wasn't over. "Alessandro, where are you going? We haven't even ordered. I've lost my appetite." He turned to leave, then paused, his eyes finding mine one more time. "You handled that well. Not everyone can keep their dignity when someone's trying to strip it away." Then he was gone, Vivienne hurrying after him on her stiletto heels, leaving me standing in a pool of spilled wine with $500 on the table and the distinct feeling that my life had just tilted off its axis. I should have left the money, should have reported the incident to my manager, should have forgotten the entire encounter. Instead, I pocketed the bills and spent the rest of my shift wondering why a man who commanded obedience with a single word would bother complimenting a waitress. I found out the answer the next morning when 2 men in black suits appeared at my apartment door with a summons I couldn't refuse. Chapter 2. When they came for me at dawn. The knocking started at 6 a.m., sharp and insistent, the kind that said they'd break down the door if I didn't answer. I'd been awake anyway, my nursing textbook open on the kitchen table, cold coffee growing a film beside my laptop. Finals were in 2 weeks, and I'd been pulling all-nighters to balance work and school. I checked the peephole and felt my stomach drop. 2 men stood in the hallway, both well over 6 feet, both wearing dark suits that did nothing to hide the bulk of shoulder holsters. The one on the left had a scar running from his temple to his jaw. The one on the right was younger, with cold blue eyes and the kind of pretty face that probably made people underestimate him until it was too late. "Elena Russo?" The scarred one called through the door. "We need you to come with us." Every instinct I had screamed at me to stay silent, to pretend I wasn't home. But they knew I was here. I could see the shadow of my movement through the peephole's fisheye lens. "Who are you?" I called back, proud that my voice didn't shake. "Mr. Vitale sent us. He requests your presence at his estate." Vitale. Alessandro's last name, I realized with a cold rush of dread. I should have known. Should have recognized him from the newspapers, from the whispered stories that circulated through Chicago's service industry. Alessandro Vitale, heir to the Vitale crime family, the man who controlled everything from the docks to City Hall with an iron fist wrapped in expensive Italian leather. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Leave, or I'm calling the police." The pretty one laughed, and the sound was worse than if he'd threatened me outright. "Miss Russo, Mr. Vitale doesn't make requests he expects to be refused. We can do this. Easy, or we can do this hard. Your choice." My phone sat on the kitchen counter, too far away to grab and dial before they could break through the cheap apartment door. I was a 24-year-old nursing student who could barely afford rent. I had no illusions about fighting off two armed men. Why does he want to see me? That's between you and Mr. Vitale. But I can tell you this, you're not in trouble. If you were, we wouldn't be knocking. The implication hung heavy in the air. If I were in trouble, I'd already be dead or disappeared. Somehow, that wasn't as comforting as he probably meant it to be. "Give me 5 minutes to change." "You have 3. I threw on jeans and a sweater, shoved my feet into boots, and grabbed my phone, though what good it would do me, I didn't know. Who would I call? The police, who were probably on Vitale's payroll. My aunt in Boston, who'd warned me about Chicago's dangers. When I opened the door, Scarface, I'd started thinking of him that way, gestured toward the stairs. "After you, Miss Russo." The black SUV waiting at the curb looked like it cost more than my entire apartment building. The interior was all leather and tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that screamed money and menace in equal measure. I climbed in, flanked by my escorts, and tried not to think about how many people had sat in this same seat on their way to somewhere they'd never return from. We drove through Chicago's morning traffic in silence, heading north toward the lake. The neighborhoods got progressively wealthier, brownstones giving way to mansions hidden behind iron gates and mature trees. When we finally turned through a pair of gates that looked like they belonged to an Italian villa, I felt my breath catch. The Vitale estate sprawled across what had to be 10 acres of prime lakefront property. The mansion itself was 3 stories of old-world elegance, all stone and arched windows, with wings spreading out like welcoming arms that promised anything but welcome. "Out," the pretty one said, opening my door. My legs trembled as I stepped onto the circular drive. The morning sun glinted off windows that probably cost more than my entire education. Somewhere, birds sang, oblivious to the fact that this beautiful place was built on blood and fear. The front door opened before we reached it, revealing a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. "Miss Russo," she said with a slight Italian accent. "Mr. Vitale is expecting you. This way." I followed her through a foyer that belonged in a museum, past oil paintings that were probably originals, up a sweeping staircase that curved like a lover's spine. My escort had disappeared, leaving me alone with this stern woman who moved through the mansion like a ghost who'd haunted it for decades. She stopped in front of a set of double doors on the second floor and knocked twice. "Enter," came that voice I remembered from the restaurant, quiet, commanding, impossible to ignore. The woman opened the door and gestured for me to walk through. And there, standing by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Michigan, was Alessandro Vitale, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt rolled to his elbows, holding a coffee cup and looking at me like I was a puzzle he'd been trying to solve all night. "Miss Russo," he said, "thank you for coming. We have a great deal to discuss." The doors closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like the ceiling of a tomb. "You didn't give me much choice," I managed. His smile was sharp as a blade. "No, I didn't. But then, neither did my grandfather when he called me at 4 this morning to inform me that I'm getting married. To you. Today." Chapter 3. The grandfather's decree. I must have heard him wrong. Must have. Because the alternative that this dangerous, beautiful man had just said we were getting married was insane. "I'm sorry." "What?" Alessandro set down his coffee cup with deliberate care and turned to face me fully. In the morning light streaming through the windows, he looked younger than I'd thought, maybe 30, 32 at most. But his eyes were ancient, weighted with things I couldn't begin to imagine. "My grandfather is dying," he said, his tone conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. Cancer. The doctors give him 3 months, maybe 4. He's the Don of the Vitali family, and before he dies, he wants to see me settled, married, to a good Italian girl from a respectable family. I'm a waitress, a nursing student. I'm nobody. Your grandfather was Lorenzo Russo. The name hit me like cold water. I hadn't heard it in years, not since my mother died when I was 16. She'd never talked about her father, never explained why we'd left Italy when I was just a baby, why we'd changed our name from Russo to Ross before changing it back after her death. How do you know that? I know everything about you, Elena. He moved closer, each step measured, predatory. I know you're 24 years old, enrolled in Rush University's nursing program, working 3 jobs to pay your tuition. I know you've lived in Chicago for 8 years, that you have no siblings, no parents, just an aunt in Boston who you call once a month. I know you grew up in New York, in a neighborhood where your mother worked as a seamstress and kept her head down and her past buried. Fear crawled up my spine, cold and slithering. You had me investigated. Last night, after dinner, he was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. My grandfather saw the security footage from the restaurant. He saw Vivienne's display. He saw you, and he saw your name tag. I don't understand. Lorenzo Russo was one of the most respected men in Calabria. He refused to join the 'Ndrangheta, refused to be corrupted. When they killed his son, your uncle, he sent your mother away to protect her. He died 10 years ago, still respected, still clean. Alessandro's jaw tightened. My grandfather wants to believe that honor still exists in our world, wants to believe I can build something better than what he built. And when he saw you, a Russo girl, working honestly, keeping your dignity while Vivienne tried to strip it away, he decided you were the answer. I'm not an answer. I'm a person, with a life, with plans that don't include marrying a stranger. I know. For the first time, something like regret flickered across his face. But my grandfather doesn't make suggestions, Elena. He makes decrees. And when he says I marry Lorenzo Russo's granddaughter today, the only alternative is war within my own family. My cousins, my uncles, they're already circling, waiting for any sign of weakness. If I refuse him now, when he's dying, I lose everything. The family splits. People die. So you're asking me to save your empire by destroying my life? No. His hand came up, not touching me, just hovering near my face like he wanted to but knew better. I'm asking you to save lives. Hundreds of them. The people who work for my family, who depend on us for protection, for income, the fragile peace we've built with the other families. And in return, I'm offering you everything you need. Your nursing school paid for, security, wealth, protection. I don't want your blood money. Everyone wants something, Elena. Name your price. I wanted to throw his offer in his face, to storm out of his mansion and his life, and never look back. But I wasn't stupid. I'd seen what happened to people who refused the Mafia. And as I stood there, watching this man who commanded respect with a word, who'd built an empire on violence and fear, I realized he was trapped too. Trapped by legacy, by duty, by the weight of hundreds of lives depending on his decisions. If I say no, then you walk out that door, and you never see me again. But my grandfather will send you gifts, money, guards you don't want. He'll try to win you over, to convince you, because he's decided you're the one who can redeem his family. And when he dies, my cousins will remember that you refused me, that you were offered a place in this family and rejected it. They'll see you as an insult to our honor. You're saying I'm dead either way. I'm saying you're safer as my wife than as the woman who embarrassed the Vital family. And I'm saying, he stopped, something raw crossing his face before he locked it away. I'm saying, I'll never hurt you. I'll give you your own wing of the house, your own life. All I need is your name on a marriage certificate and your presence at family functions. That's all. That's all, I repeated hollowly. Just my entire future. Yes, at least he was honest. At least he wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was, a transaction. A business deal sealed with wedding vows that meant nothing. I thought of my studio apartment with its leaking ceiling, my student loan debt that grew every semester, the way I fell asleep over textbooks and woke up exhausted for another shift. I thought of the freedom I'd fought for, the independence I'd built from nothing. Then I thought of hundreds of people dying because I refused to sign a piece of paper. I have conditions, I heard myself say. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Relief, maybe. Or respect. Name them. I finished nursing school. I work at a hospital when I graduate. I'm not some trophy wife who lunches and shops. Agreed. I want my own space, like you said. And you don't— I swallowed hard. You don't touch me. This isn't a real marriage. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Agreed. And when your grandfather dies, if we can find a way to end this safely, we do. I get my life back. He was quiet for a long moment, his black eyes searching mine for something I couldn't name. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, almost gentle. I'll do everything in my power to give you your freedom, Elena. I promise you that. It wasn't enough. Nothing could be enough to make this right. But it was all I had. Then I guess I'm getting married today. Alessandro nodded once, sharp and final. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call that would change everything. Prepare the chapel, he said quietly. We have a wedding in 2 hours. Chapter 4. Blood on the Altar. The chapel was tucked in the east wing of the mansion, small and intimate, with stained glass windows that threw colored light across marble floors. I stood in a bedroom that wasn't mine, wearing a dress that wasn't mine, while 3 women I'd never met fussed over my hair and makeup like I was actually a bride instead of a prisoner with better accommodations. The dress was beautiful, I had to admit. Ivory silk that flowed like water, simple and elegant, with delicate lace at the sleeves and neckline. Someone had guessed my size perfectly, probably the same person who'd compiled that terrifyingly thorough dossier on my life. You're very lucky, one of the women said in Italian-accented English as she pinned my dark hair into soft waves. Mr. Vitali is a good man, protective. My daughter works in his office. He paid for her mother's surgery last year, asked for nothing in return. A good man who ran a criminal empire. A good man who'd had me investigated and summoned at dawn and offered me a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled and thanked her, and tried not to think about the fact that in an hour, I'd be married to a stranger. The door opened without knocking, and the steel-haired woman from earlier entered, carrying a small velvet box. The other women will finish here, she said. I need a moment with Miss Russo. The makeup artist scattered like leaves before wind. When we were alone, the woman closed the door and fixed me with a look that could have stripped paint. My name is Lucia, she said. I've served the Vitali family for 30 years. I helped raise Alessandro after his mother died. I'm sorry. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. She moved closer, and I saw something fierce and protective in her dark eyes. I'm telling you this so you understand that I know him. I know what he's capable of, the violence, the ruthlessness, the cold decisions that keep him awake at night. But I also know his heart, what's left of it. And I'm telling you that he didn't have to offer you conditions. He didn't have to promise you freedom or your own life. He could have simply taken what he wanted, because that's what men in his position do. Should I be grateful? No. But you should understand that he's trying. She opened the velvet box, revealing a ring that made my breath catch an emerald surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum, old-world craftsmanship that spoke of generations. This was his mother's, his grandmother's before that. He wanted you to wear it. I stared at the ring, at this piece of family history I had no right to wear. I can't. You can. You will. Because whether you like it or not, you're about to become a Vitali, and in this world, symbols matter. This ring tells everyone who sees it that you're under Alessandro's protection, that you belong to him, that anyone who touches you answers to him. She took my hand before I could protest, sliding the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Of course, heavy and beautiful and terrifying. One more thing, Lucia said softly. He won't hurt you. But others will try. His enemies will see you as a weapon to use against him. His family will test you, push you, try to find your weaknesses. You need to be strong, Elena. Stronger than you've ever been. Can you do that? I looked at this woman who'd raised a monster and loved him anyway, who was warning me and welcoming me in the same breath. I don't know, I admitted, but I'll try. She smiled. Then, and it transformed her stern face into something almost warm. That's all any of us can do. The ceremony was brief and surreal. Alessandro's grandfather presided from a wheelchair, a wizened man with eyes that still burned with fierce intelligence despite his failing body. A priest spoke words I barely heard over the rushing in my ears. Alessandro slid a platinum band onto my finger, his hand steady while mine trembled. When he kissed me, because apparently that was required, it was gentle, almost chaste, his lips barely brushing mine before he pulled away. But I felt the heat of it, the promise of something that terrified me more than all his threats and offers combined. "You may present Mr. and Mrs. Vitali," the priest intoned. Mrs. Vitali. I'd become someone else in the space of an hour. The old Don beckoned us closer, his voice a papery whisper. "You honor our family, Elena. You give me hope that we can be more than what we've been. Promise me you'll help him become the man he should be." What could I say to that? This dying man who'd orchestrated my kidnapping and forced marriage because he wanted to believe his grandson could be redeemed? So I lied. I promise. His smile was beatific, and I hated myself a little for giving him that peace. The rest of the day blurred together. A reception attended by men in expensive suits with dead eyes, women dripping with jewels and judgment, all of them evaluating me, calculating my worth, my weakness. Alessandro stayed close, his hand a warm brand at the small of my back, his presence a wall between me and the sharks circling in his living room. It was near midnight when the last guest left, and I finally escaped to the bedroom Lucia had prepared for me, not Alessandro's room, per our agreement, but a suite in the west wing that was bigger than my entire apartment. I'd just kicked off the heels that had been slowly killing me when someone knocked. "Come in," I called, expecting Lucia. Alessandro entered. Instead, still in his wedding suit but with his tie loosened, his dark hair slightly mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked exhausted and dangerous, and far too human for comfort. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said. "I'm married to a mob boss and living in a mansion that probably has bodies buried in the foundation. I'm fantastic." His lips twitched. Fair enough. We stood there in awkward silence, this stranger, who was now my husband, until I couldn't take it anymore. "Why me?" I asked. "Really? There must be dozens of Italian girls whose grandfathers your family respects. Why go through all this for a waitress you met once?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the window, staring out at the dark lake. "Because when Vivienne tried to humiliate you, you didn't break. You didn't cry or beg or fight back. You just stood there with your dignity intact, and I thought..." He stopped, his jaw working. "I thought, there's someone who understands what it means to survive with your soul intact. And maybe, if I'm going to spend my life trying to build something better than what my father and grandfather built, I need someone like that beside me, even if it's just for show." I didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to process this glimpse of the man beneath the monster. "Thank you," I finally managed, "for being honest." He turned, and in the dim light of the bedroom, his face was all shadows and sharp edges. "Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow, you meet the rest of the family, and they won't be as welcoming as the grandfather." He was almost to the door when I called out, "Alessandro? Yes? Are we safe? Here?" He smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "I have 200 men who would die to protect what's mine. You're the safest you've ever been in your life." "What's mine? Not you're safe. Not I'll protect you. What's mine?" And that, I realized as the door closed behind him, was the most terrifying thing he'd said all day. Chapter 5. When his world came for me, I woke to gunfire. The sharp crack 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 of automatic weapons shattered the pre-dawn quiet, followed by shouting in Italian, the screech of tires, the heavy thud of something or someone hitting the ground. I rolled out of bed, my heart hammering, my nurse's training kicking in even as my mind screamed at me to hide. The bedroom window overlooked the front drive, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. 5 black SUVs had crashed through the front gate, disgorging at least 20 armed men, but they were met by twice that number pouring from the mansion, from the guardhouses, from positions I hadn't even known existed. The Vital estate had transformed into a war zone in seconds, and in the middle of it all, directing his men with hand signals and barked commands, was Alessandro. He'd shed his suit jacket, and his white shirt was already stained with blood, his or someone else's, I couldn't tell. He moved like violence made flesh, like he'd been born to this, firing with precision while using a pillar for cover. I should have stayed in my room, should have locked the door and hidden in the bathroom like any sane person. Instead, I grabbed my phone and ran. The hallway was chaos, staff members being herded to safe rooms by armed guards, the rattle of gunfire echoing through marble corridors, the acrid smell of smoke beginning to fill the air. I followed the sound of the fighting, my bare feet silent on cold floors, until I reached a window that overlooked the courtyard. That's when I saw him fall. Alessandro went down hard, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming across his white shirt in a spreading stain. Two of his men immediately formed a shield around him, returning fire. But I could see it wasn't enough. The attackers were pressing forward, and Alessandro was trying to stand but couldn't, his face gray with pain or blood loss or both. I didn't think. I just moved. The side entrance to the courtyard was unguarded. Everyone had rushed to the front. I burst through it, my nursing instincts overriding every survival instinct I had, and ran toward Alessandro's position. "Are you insane?" one of his guards shouted, trying to push me back. "Get inside. I'm a nurse. Let me see him." The guard looked torn between following orders and letting me help his boss. Alessandro made the decision for him. "Let her through," he ground out, his jaw tight with pain. I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands already moving to assess the wound. Shoulder injury, through and through from what I could see, but close to major vessels. He was losing blood fast, his shirt soaked, his face too pale. "You need a hospital," I said, pressing my hands against the wound to slow the bleeding. "Not an option." He tried to sit up, winced. "We need to get back inside. Now. You'll bleed out. Then stop the bleeding here." Another burst of gunfire made me flinch, but I held my position, keeping pressure on the wound. Around us, his men were winning the attackers falling back, regrouping near their vehicles. But it wasn't over. I could see reinforcements arriving, more men with more guns, and we were completely exposed. "Can you walk?" I asked. "Can I breathe? Then I can walk." With help from two guards, we got Alessandro to his feet and back into the mansion. The fighting continued outside, but the house itself was locked down. Every entrance guarded, every window a firing position. I commandeered a sitting room on the first floor, ordered everyone out except Lucia, and turned it into a makeshift trauma bay. Alessandro sat in a leather chair while I cut away his ruined shirt, revealing a body that was all lean muscle, and old scars evidence of a violent life that suddenly felt very, very real. "This is going to hurt," I warned, cleaning the wound with vodka from the bar because I didn't have time to find proper antiseptic. "I've been shot before. That's not comforting. Wasn't meant to be." I worked quickly, efficiently, packing the wound to stop the bleeding, fashioning a pressure bandage from torn sheets that Lucia provided without question. Outside, the gunfire was dying down, but the damage was done. 3 of Alessandro's men were dead, 7 wounded, and the front gate was a twisted wreck. "Who were they?" I asked, tying off the bandage. "Bonanno family." Alessandro's voice was tight with pain and fury. "They think the marriage weakened me. That taking a wife makes me soft. Does it?" His black eyes met mine, and there was nothing soft in them. "No, but they'll learn that the hard way." The sitting room door burst open, and a man strode in late 20s, handsome in a cruel way, with Alessandro's dark coloring but none of his control. His gaze raked over me with undisguised contempt before fixing on Alessandro. "This is her fault," he spat. "You marry some nobody and immediately were attacked. Your judgment is compromised, cousin. Careful, Marco." Alessandro's voice was deadly quiet despite his injury. "You're speaking about my wife. Your wife is a liability. Look at you, shot because you were distracted, weakened. The family should have been consulted before you made such a reckless decision. The Don approved the marriage. The Don is dying and sentimental." Marco moved closer, and I instinctively shifted between him and Alessandro. The action made Marco laugh, harsh and mocking. "Oh, this is perfect. The little waitress thinks she can protect you. How touching. Get out, Marco." Alessandro tried to stand, but the movement made him sway. I caught his arm, keeping him seated, very aware of the fresh blood seeping through the bandage. "He needs rest," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "And you need to leave." Marco's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist hard enough to bruise. "You don't give orders here, princess. You're a pretty face and a pedigree, nothing more. You want to survive in this family? Learn your place." The crack of Alessandro's fist, connecting with Marco's jaw, echoed through the room. His cousin stumbled back, blood trickling from his split lip, shock and rage warring on his face. "Touch her again," Alessandro said softly, dangerously, "and I'll kill you. Family or not." Marco straightened, dabbing at his bleeding mouth. "You'll regret this, both of you." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The silence he left was thick with tension and unspoken threats. "He's right, you know," I said quietly. "I am a liability." "No." Alessandro caught my hand, his grip firm despite his injury. "You just saved my life. You ran into a firefight to help me when you could have stayed safe. That's not a liability, Elena. That's—" He stopped, something raw and unguarded crossing his face before he locked it away. "That's more than I deserve." I looked down at our joined hands, at the blood, his blood on my skin, at the emerald ring that marked me as his. And I realized that somewhere between the forced wedding and this moment, something had shifted. I'd stopped seeing him as just my captor, and he'd stopped seeing me as just a pawn. We'd become something more complicated, something dangerous, something that could get us both killed. Chapter 6. The Safe Room Confession. They moved us to the panic room while Alessandro's men secured the estate. It was buried deep in the mansion's foundation, steel-reinforced walls, independent air supply, enough weapons and supplies to withstand a siege. The kind of room that shouldn't exist outside of spy movies, but here it was, monitoring every corner of the property on dozens of screens. Alessandro sat in the chair I'd forced him into, his face too pale, his breathing shallow. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped, and I knew he needed real medical attention. "You need a doctor," I said for the 10th time. "Can't risk it. Hospital records, questions, police reports." He leaned his head back, eyes closed. "I've had worse. That's a terrible metric for healthcare decisions." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "You sound like a nurse." "I am a nurse. Or I will be, if I survive being married to you long enough to graduate." Fair point. I checked his bandage again, not liking how much blood was seeping through. In a real hospital, I'd have him in surgery. Here, in this underground bunker, I had basic supplies and prayers. "Tell me about Marco," I said, trying to keep him talking, keep him conscious. "Why does he hate you?" Alessandro's eyes opened, dark and assessing. "You don't want to know. I'm already in this. I might as well understand what I'm in." He was quiet for a long moment, and I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, the sound heavy with old pain. "Marco's father was my uncle, my father's younger brother. He thought he should have been Don when my grandfather stepped down, but the family chose my father instead. Uncle Antonio never forgave that. He raised Marco to believe he'd been cheated, that the leadership should have been his. When my father died 3 years ago and I took over, it got worse." "How did your father die?" "Car bomb, meant for me." His voice was flat, emotionless, but I heard the guilt beneath it. I was supposed to be in that car. Changed my schedule at the last minute. "Alessandro, they never found who did it. Could have been rivals. Could have been someone in the family who wanted a different successor. Could have been Antonio, using the chaos to make his own move." He met my eyes. "I've built my life on not knowing who killed my father, on making alliances with men who might have ordered his death. That's what this world is, Elena. Constant suspicion, constant threat, and you walked into it to save my life." I cleaned my hands on a cloth, trying to process everything he'd told me. If it's so dangerous, why not leave? Why not take your money and disappear? Because 200 families depend on me for their livelihood. Because if I leave, men like Marco take over, and everything becomes bloodier, more violent. Because, he stopped, jaw clenching, because this is all I know how to be. There was something devastatingly honest in that admission. I moved closer, checking his pulse too fast but steady. His skin was clammy under my fingers. "You're more than this," I said quietly. "You offered me freedom when you could have just taken what you wanted. You protected me from Marco. I hesitated. You haven't broken any of your promises to me. The day's not over yet. Stop that. Stop acting like you're nothing but a monster." His hand came up, catching mine against his chest. I could feel his heart racing beneath my palm, could see something vulnerable and desperate in his eyes. "What if I am, Elena? What if the best I can offer you is a gilded cage and protection from enemies I created?" His thumb traced over my knuckles, the touch gentle despite the violence in his words. "What if marrying you was the most selfish thing I've ever done, because for one moment I wanted something good in my life, even if I don't deserve it?" My breath caught. This was the man beneath the armor, beneath the cold commands and calculated decisions. This was Alessandro Vitale, stripped bare by blood loss and exhaustion and something that looked dangerously like longing. "You're not thinking clearly," I managed. You've lost blood. You're in shock. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. He pulled me closer, his good hand cupping my face with a tenderness that made my chest ache. You terrify me, Elena. You ran into gunfire to save me. You stood up to Marco. You're everything I'm not brave and honest and good, and I'm going to corrupt you just by keeping you here. Then let me go. The words hung between us, a test we both knew I was failing. Because I didn't want to go. Not anymore. Not after seeing him bleed, after hearing the truth in his voice, after feeling the weight of his world settle onto my shoulders and realizing I was strong enough to carry it. I can't, he whispered. God help me, I can't. Then he was kissing me, and it was nothing like the chaste press of lips at our wedding. This was desperate and hungry, his mouth moving against mine like I was oxygen and he was drowning. I should have pulled away, should have remembered this was just a marriage of convenience, that we'd agreed to keep our distance. Instead, I kissed him back. My hands found his hair, careful of his injury, and he made a sound low in his throat that sent heat racing through my veins. His tongue traced my lower lip, seeking entrance, and I opened for him, tasting blood and danger and something sweeter beneath it all. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This is a mistake, he said, but his hand was still cradling my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. Probably. You should hate me. I should do a lot of things. He laughed, the sound rough and pained. What are we doing, Elena? I don't know. But right now, you need to rest before you pass out. We can figure out the rest later. Bossy. You married a nurse. What did you expect? Something softened in his expression, and for a moment, he looked almost peaceful. I expected a transaction, a business arrangement. I didn't expect you. Before I could respond, the panic room door opened. Scarface, whose real name I'd learned was Dante, stood in the entrance, his expression grim. Boss, we've secured the perimeter, but we've got a problem. Alessandro straightened, the vulnerability vanishing behind his usual mask of control. What problem? The Bonanno family is claiming the attack was retaliation for you killing one of their lieutenants last month. They're saying you broke the peace accord, that this marriage was a distraction to hide your aggression. Dante's eyes flicked to me, then back to Alessandro. They're calling for a sit-down. All 5 families, tomorrow night. Let them call. Boss, if you don't go, it's an admission of guilt. They'll have grounds to move against you with the other family's blessing. Alessandro stood, swaying slightly, his face going even paler. I moved to support him, but he waved me off. Then I go. Set it up. You can't, I protested. You're injured. You need at least 48 hours before, Elena. His voice was gentle but firm. This is my world. If I show weakness now, we're dead. Both of us. He was right. I knew he was right. But watching him walk out of that panic room, bleeding and exhausted, to face men who wanted him dead, felt like watching someone march toward execution. Dante paused at the door. For what it's worth, Mrs. Vitali, that was brave. What you did out there. The men are talking about it. You've earned respect today. Then I was alone in the underground bunker, surrounded by screens showing the damage from the attack. My hands still stained with my husband's blood, my lips still tingling from his kiss. And I realized that somewhere in the last 24 hours, this had stopped being a forced marriage and started being something far more dangerous. I'd started to care. Chapter 7. The 5 Families' Judgment. The sit-down was held in neutral territory, an old restaurant in Little Italy that had been closed for the evening, its windows covered, its doors guarded by men from all 5 families. Alessandro had insisted I come with him, saying my absence would seem like fear, like he was hiding his bride because the marriage had been a sham. So I sat beside him at the large round table, wearing a black dress Lucia had selected. My hair pulled back, my face carefully made up to hide the exhaustion and fear. Alessandro's shoulder was bandaged beneath his tailored suit, and I knew he'd taken enough painkillers to function but not enough to dull his edge. He needed to be sharp tonight. We both did. The other dons arrived one by one. Dominic Bonanno, the man whose family had attacked us, came with his nephew and consigliere. Robert Chen, head of the Chinese syndicate that controlled the ports. Viktor Morozov, the Russian Pakan who ran the drug trade. And Antonio Vitali, Marco's father, who arrived last and took his seat with a smile that made my skin crawl. Gentlemen, Alessandro said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been born to command. We're here because the Bonanno family claims I broke the peace accord. I'm here to refute that claim and to demand restitution for the attack on my home and my wife." Dominic Bonanno leaned forward, his thick fingers drumming the table. "Your home was attacked because you murdered my nephew, Leo. Don't pretend this was unprovoked. Leo Bonanno was killed by the Russians 3 weeks ago. I have proof." Alessandro nodded to Dante, who placed a tablet on the table, showing security footage of a warehouse where a young man I assumed was Leo was shot by men with distinctive tattoos, Russian prison markings. Viktor Morozov's expression didn't change. "That footage could be faked. It's not. And you know it's not, Victor, because you ordered the hit after Leo tried to muscle in on your territory at the docks." Alessandro's voice was cold, precise. "You used his death to frame me, hoping to start a war between the Italians while you consolidated power." The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. I forced myself to stay still, to keep my expression neutral even though my heart was racing. One wrong word here and we could all end up dead. "You accuse me of this?" Victor's accent thickened with anger. "With no proof except your word. I have 3 witnesses who saw your men dump Leo's body at the docks. They're willing to testify." "Testify to whom? The police?" Victor laughed. "We don't operate that way, Vitali. If you want to make accusations, back them with something real." Robert Chen, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "The question isn't just about Leo Bonanno's death. The question is about this marriage." His dark eyes fixed on me, assessing. "It's convenient, isn't it? Right when tensions are high, right when questions are being asked about your leadership, suddenly you marry an outsider. Some think it's a sign of weakness. Others think it's a distraction." "My marriage is my business," Alessandro said flatly. "Everything you do is our business when it affects the balance of power." Antonio Vitale spoke for the first time, his voice smooth as oil. "The family should have been consulted before you took such a significant step. Some of us feel you're making decisions without proper counsel. The Don approved it. The Don is dying. His judgment may not be what it once was." Alessandro's hand tightened on the table, the only sign of his anger. "Careful, uncle. That's your father you're speaking about. I speak truth. And the truth is, nephew, that you've created chaos. Your hasty marriage, your conflicts with the Bonannos, your refusal to share power with the family, it all points to a man losing control." I felt Alessandro tense beside me, saw the careful control slipping. Before he could respond, before he could say something that would turn this meeting into violence, I spoke. "Gentlemen, may I say something?" Every eye turned to me. I felt their judgment, their dismissal, their curiosity. Good. Let them underestimate me. I understand that my marriage to Alessandro seems sudden, suspicious, even, but I'm not some nobody he picked up to create a distraction. I met each man's eyes in turn, channeling every ounce of confidence I didn't feel. My grandfather was Lorenzo Russo of Calabria, a man all of you would have respected, a man who believed in honor, in family, in doing business the right way. Alessandro chose me because he's trying to build something better than what you've all built, and whether you like it or not, I'm here to help him do it. The silence was deafening. Then Dominic Bonanno started laughing, the sound harsh and mocking. "The little girl has fire. I'll give you that, Vitali. But fire doesn't win wars. Blood does. And you've spilled mine. I haven't spilled anything. Victor has. And unless you want to look like a fool who was manipulated into attacking the wrong family, I suggest you redirect your anger where it belongs." Alessandro's hand found mine under the table, squeezing once. Support or warning, I couldn't tell. Viktor Morozov stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't need to listen to these accusations. You have footage that proves nothing. Words from a wife who knows nothing about our world, and desperation from a man who's losing his grip on power." He buttoned his jacket, signaling to his men. "When you have real proof, Vitali, come find me. Until then, stay out of my way." He left, his men following, and the balance in the room shifted again. Robert Chen stood as well. "I'm neutral in this. The Chinese have no stake in Italian or Russian conflicts. But Elena's right about one thing: you're all being played. Figure out by whom before you destroy each other." He nodded to me respectfully. "Mrs. Vitali." Then he was gone too, leaving just the Italians. Dominic Bonanno stared at the tablet, still showing the footage of his nephew's death. When he looked up, his face was carved from stone. "If what you say is true, if Victor killed my Leo, then you and I have no quarrel. But if I find out you're lying, if this is some scheme to cover your own crimes, I'll burn your world to the ground. Your mansion, your businesses, your wife." He looked at me. "Everything." "Understood," Alessandro said calmly. "And when you confirm what I've told you, I expect a formal apology and restitution for the damage to my property and the loss of my men." Dominic nodded once, then left with his nephew, which left only Antonio and Marco, still seated across from us, matching predatory smiles on their faces. "Well done, nephew," Antonio said. "You've turned Victor into your enemy and made a tentative peace with the Bonanos. Very clever. But you've exposed yourself in the process. Now everyone knows your marriage is a gambit, a play for legitimacy and power, and gambits can fail. Is that a threat, Uncle? It's an observation. The family can't afford your experiments in honor and reform. We've survived for generations by being ruthless, by taking what we want, by crushing anyone who opposes us. Your grandfather's dying wish doesn't change that reality." Alessandro stood, and despite his injury, despite the exhaustion I could see in every line of his body, he radiated power. "The meeting is over. Leave my territory." Antonio rose smoothly. "Think about what I've said, Alessandro, before your idealism gets everyone killed." When they were finally gone, when it was just Alessandro and me and his guards, he sagged against the table, his face gray. "We need to get you home," I said urgently. "In a minute." He looked at me, and there was something fierce and grateful in his eyes. "You were incredible. The way you spoke to them, the way you invoked your grandfather's name, you just earned respect that would have taken years to build." I was terrified. "I know. So was I." He managed to smile. "We make a good team, Alessandro." The first shot came through the covered window, shattering glass and wood. Then another. Then a barrage. "Down!" Dante roared, throwing himself over us as the restaurant erupted into chaos. And I realized that Antonio's threat hadn't been a threat at all. It had been a countdown to war. Chapter 8. The Choice Between Worlds. We made it back to the estate by some miracle, Dante driving like a demon while Alessandro bled beside me in the back seat. His wound reopened, his breathing labored. The attack at the restaurant had been coordinated, professional. Someone had known exactly when and where we'd be vulnerable. Someone inside Alessandro's organization had betrayed us. The mansion had been transformed into a fortress. Armed guards patrolled every inch of the grounds. Steel shutters covered the windows. The beauty I'd first seen had been replaced by brutal pragmatism. This was no longer a home. It was a military base preparing for siege. I worked on Alessandro's shoulder in his private study, the one room he'd claimed was safe, with Dante and 2 other guards posted at the door. The wound was worse this time. I needed to stitch it, needed proper surgical equipment, needed him to stop being so goddamn stubborn about going to a hospital. "Hold still," I ordered, threading the needle with hands that shook only slightly. "You've done this before?" "I've assisted in the ER. Never on I caught myself. Never on someone I care about." His eyes found mine, dark and intense. "Say that again." "Hold still?" The other part, I focused on the first stitch, watching the needle pierce his skin. "You know what I said." "I want to hear it again." His good hand caught my wrist, gentle but insistent. "Please. I care about you." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "I don't want to. I shouldn't. You kidnapped me, forced me into this marriage, dragged me into your nightmare world. But I care about you anyway, and I'm furious about it." His laugh was pained but genuine. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. You need better romance in your life." "I need you in my life. That's enough." I finished the stitches in silence, bandaged his shoulder, gave him antibiotics and more painkillers than he wanted. When I was done, he caught my hand again. "Elena, you need to leave. Tonight." My heart stopped. "What?" "I've made arrangements. Dante will take you to a safe house in Canada. New identity, new life, enough money to finish school and start over. You'll be free." "You're trying to get rid of me?" "I'm trying to keep you alive." He pulled me closer, his forehead touching mine. "Victor knows about you now. So does Antonio. They'll use you to get to me. The only way you're safe is if you disappear. And what happens to you? I survive. Or I don't. But at least you won't be caught in the crossfire." I pulled back, anger flooding through me. "You think I'm that weak? That fragile? I ran into gunfire to save you. I spoke up at that meeting. I'm not some victim who needs rescuing, Alessandro. I know that. But this isn't about strength. It's about... He stopped, his jaw working. It's about the fact that if something happens to you because of me, I won't survive it. Not mentally, not emotionally. I'll become the monster everyone thinks I am. Then don't let anything happen to me. Keep me safe the way you promised. I can't guarantee that. Not anymore. Someone in my organization is feeding information to my enemies. Until I find out who, everyone's at risk. Especially you. I thought about the life he was offering: escape, freedom, a chance to go back to being just Elena Russo, nursing student. Nobody special. A week ago, I would have taken it without hesitation. But that was before I'd seen him bleed. Before I'd kissed him in a panic room. Before I'd realized that the man everyone feared was also the man who'd given me more honest respect in 3 days than most people had given me in a lifetime. I'm staying, I said. Elena, I'm staying, and you can't make me leave. You promised me freedom when this was over, and I'll hold you to that. But right now, this marriage is keeping both of us alive. The moment I leave, Antonio has grounds to question your judgment. The other families will see it as weakness, and whoever's betraying you will know they've won. You're too smart for your own good. You married a nursing student. What did you expect? This time his smile was real, warm despite everything. I expected to make a decision to honor a dying man and ended up with a partner instead. Partners. I like that better than prisoner. You're still, technically a prisoner. Then I'm the weirdest Stockholm Syndrome case in history. He laughed, then winced at the pain the movement caused. I eased him back into his chair, checking his pulse, his pupil response, all the clinical signs that kept me from thinking about what I'd just committed to. Rest, I ordered. I'll stay here and make sure you don't do anything stupid, like try to coordinate a war while recovering from major trauma. Bossy, he murmured, his eyes already closing. You like it. Unfortunately, I do. I watched him drift off, his face finally relaxing into sleep, and wondered when exactly I'd stopped being his captive and started being his wife in truth. The answer came 3 hours later when Dante burst into the study, his face grim. Mrs. Vitali, we have a problem. It's the Don. He's asking for both of you. The doctors say he's fading fast, maybe hours. He wants to see you before he dies. I looked at Alessandro, still asleep in the chair, his body finally getting the rest it desperately needed. Waking him now could undo all the healing. But this was his grandfather, the man whose dying wish had brought us together. I'll wake him, I said quietly, because that's what partners did. They shared the hard moments, the painful choices, the weight of a world built on blood and honor and impossible love, even when it might destroy them both. Chapter 9. The Don's Final Gift. The old Don's bedroom smelled of sickness and expensive cologne, a combination that made my stomach turn. He lay in a massive 4-poster bed, tubes and monitors surrounding him, a private medical team standing by with the grim efficiency of people who knew death was coming. Alessandro stood at his grandfather's bedside, holding the old man's hand, his face carved from stone. I stayed back, giving them this moment, this goodbye between the leader who'd built an empire and the grandson who'd inherited its weight. Alessandro, the Don whispered, his voice paper thin. You brought her. Of course, Nonno. The old man's eyes found me, still sharp despite the body's failure. He beckoned me closer with a trembling hand. Elena, come. Let me see Lorenzo's granddaughter. I approached the bed, taking his other hand, feeling how fragile it was, bones and skin, all the power gone. You've caused quite a stir in my grandson's life, he said with a weak smile. I didn't mean to, sir. Of course you didn't. That's what makes it perfect. He looked between us, and something knowing gleamed in his eyes. You love him already. I can see it. My breath caught. I don't deny it. I'm dying, and the dying see truth that the living try to hide. He squeezed my hand gently. Alessandro, you love her too. Don't shake your head, boy. I know you. You're your father's son you love completely or not at all. Alessandro's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I thought I was giving you an anchor, the Don continued. A respectable wife to legitimize your leadership, to honor the old ways. But I see now I gave you something more dangerous. I gave you something to lose. No, don't. Let me finish. He coughed, and one of the doctors moved forward, but he waved them away impatiently. In this world, love is weakness. It gives enemies a target, a weapon to use against you. But it's also strength. It makes you fight harder, think clearer, want more than just survival. He reached beneath his pillow and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. This is for you both, my will, but also something else, information I've kept hidden for 30 years. Information about who really killed your father, Alessandro. Alessandro went rigid. You know, all this time you knew? I suspected. Now I'm certain. The proof is in that envelope, along with instructions for how to use it. The Don's voice was fading, each word an effort. But hear me, grandson. If you pursue this revenge, it will cost you everything. The family will fracture. Allies will become enemies. And Elena, his eyes found mine. You will be tested in ways that will break most people. Then why give us this? I asked. Why not let it die with you? Because he deserves to know the truth. And because the choice should be his revenge or peace, blood or future. I've lived for revenge my whole life. Watched it consume good men and make monsters of boys. I want better for Alessandro. For both of you. He pressed the envelope into Alessandro's hand, then pulled both of our hands together, covering them with his own trembling grasp. Promise me something. Promise me that whatever you choose it together. As husband and wife, as partners, as whatever you are to each other. This world will try to tear you apart. Don't let it. I promise, nonno, Alessandro said, his voice thick. The Don looked at me expectantly. I promise, I whispered. Good. He settled back against his pillows, a look of peace settling over his features. Now leave me. I'm tired, and I want to dream of your grandmother before I go to meet her. We left quietly, the envelope heavy in Alessandro's hand. In the hallway, he stopped, staring at it like it might explode. Do you want to open it now? I asked. I don't know if I want to open it at all. He looked at me, and I saw fear there, real, raw fear. What if it's Antonio? What if my own uncle killed my father? Then you'll know, and you'll decide what to do with that knowledge. Together? Together. We went back to his study, our study now, I realized. Dante was dismissed. The guards were told to give us privacy. It was just Alessandro and me and the truth waiting in a yellowed envelope. He opened it slowly, carefully, pulling out papers covered in his grandfather's spidery handwriting. As he read, I watched his face go through a series of changes, shock, grief, rage, and finally, something that looked like devastation. It was Victor, he said finally, his voice hollow. My father refused to work with the Russians, refused to let them expand into our territory. So Victor had him killed and made it look like an accident. The car bomb was his signature. He'd used it before in Moscow. Can you prove it? My grandfather could. He's documented everything. Payments to the bomber, intercepted communications, witness statements. It's all here. Enough to bring before the commission. Enough to get every family to sanction Victor's death. But, he looked up at me, and I saw the weight of the choice pressing down on him. But if I pursue this, Victor will fight back. He'll claim I'm using a dead man's paranoid notes to start a war. He'll ally with whoever offers him protection, probably Antonio. The city will burn. Hundreds will die. And at the end of it, even if I win, I'll be exactly what my grandfather feared, a man consumed by revenge, building my empire on bodies and blood. I moved closer, taking the papers from his shaking hands, setting them aside. Then I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. What do you want, Alessandro? Not what your grandfather wanted. Not what the family expects. What do you want? He was quiet for a long time, his hands coming up to cover mine. I want justice for my father. But more than that. He stopped, something breaking in his expression. More than that. I want to build something with you. Something that's not just survival and violence and revenge. I want what my grandfather said, a future, not just a blood debt. Then that's what we choose. It's not that simple. Victor needs to pay for what he did. Then we find another way. We're smart, both of us. There has to be a path between blind vengeance and letting him walk away unpunished. You're asking me to be better than I am. No. I pulled him closer, resting my forehead against his. I'm asking you to be who you already are, beneath all the armor and fear. The man who offered me freedom. The man who protected me from Marco. The man who's been trying so hard to be better than what this world demands. His arms came around me, careful of his injured shoulder, and he held me like I was the only solid thing in a tilting world. I don't deserve you, he murmured into my hair. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. Elena Vitali, my wife, my partner, my what? My salvation, he finished. If such a thing exists for men like me. I pulled back just enough to kiss him, pouring every complicated feeling of the past few days into it, fear and anger and hope and something that felt dangerously close to love. He kissed me back with matching intensity, his good hand tangling in my hair, his breath coming fast. When we broke apart, both of us breathing hard, I said the thing I'd been holding back since the panic room. I'm in love with you. It's insane and probably stupid and definitely too fast, but it's true. And I need you to know that before we decide what to do about Victor, before we face whatever comes next. Alessandro stared at me like I'd just performed a miracle. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, you stubborn, impossible, beautiful mafia boss. He laughed, the sound almost giddy with relief. I love you too. I've been in love with you since you ran into gunfire to save me. Maybe before that, maybe since you stood in that restaurant and kept your dignity while Vivienne tried to destroy you. I don't know when it started. I just know I can't imagine my life without you in it. Then we face this together. All of it, Victor, Antonio, the future, everything. Together, he agreed. The decision came 2 hours later, after we'd read through all of his grandfather's evidence, after we'd called in Dante and his most trusted men, after we'd carefully planned every move. We wouldn't kill Victor, not directly, but we would expose him. Alessandro would take the evidence to the commission, the ruling body of all 5 families, and let them decide Victor's fate. It would be justice, not revenge. It would be choosing the rule of law, even the twisted law of the Mafia, over personal vendetta. It was a risk, a massive risk, but it was also a statement about the kind of leader Alessandro wanted to be, the kind of leader we would be together. Chapter 10. Unto Death and Beyond. The commission met at dawn in an abandoned courthouse that the families had been using for these gatherings since Prohibition. Alessandro had spent the night preparing, marshalling evidence, calling in every favor he was owed. His shoulder was still healing, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with purpose. I'd insisted on coming with him. It's too dangerous, he'd argued. Everything with you is dangerous. I'm coming. So there I was, sitting beside my husband in a room full of the most powerful criminals in Chicago, watching as he methodically destroyed Victor Morozov's life. The evidence was damning. Financial records, communications, witness statements, all carefully compiled by a dying man who'd wanted his grandson to have a choice. Alessandro presented it with cold precision, his voice never wavering, his case airtight. Victor sat across from us, his face growing paler with each revelation. When Alessandro finished, the silence in the room was suffocating. This is fiction, Victor finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. A desperate attempt by a young leader to consolidate power by eliminating rivals. Then explain the payment to Pavel Sokolov, Alessandro said quietly. The bomber who died in a car accident 3 days after my father's funeral. The bomber whose widow received a payoff from one of your shell companies. The bomber whose phone records show 17 calls to your personal number in the week before the assassination. Circumstantial. There's also his confession. Alessandro pulled out a perfect recording device. Given to my grandfather 2 days before Pavel died, he knew he was a loose end. He wanted insurance. The recording was devastating. Pavel's voice, thick with a Russian accent, describing in detail how Victor had ordered the hit, how he'd provided the explosives, how he'd personally verified that Alessandro's father was in the car before giving the signal to detonate. When it finished, Robert Chen spoke first. The evidence is conclusive. Victor Morozov ordered the assassination of Luca Vitale, breaking the peace accord and endangering all of us. The penalty is clear. Death. The penalty was always death. But Dominic Bonanno surprised everyone. I vote for exile. Strip him of his territory, his businesses, his protection. Let him live knowing he lost everything. Alessandro looked at him sharply. Exile was almost unheard of. It suggested weakness, suggested that murder could be forgiven. But Dominic met his gaze steadily. Your grandfather wanted you to be better than us, he said quietly. Wanted you to build something different. Killing Victor makes you like us. Exiling him makes a statement. It was a gift. An acknowledgement of the choice Alessandro had made to pursue justice instead of revenge. An offer of alliance wrapped in mercy. Alessandro stood, and every eye in the room turned to him. I vote for exile, he said, on the condition that Viktor Morozov leaves Chicago within 24 hours and never returns. If he's seen in this city again, the death sentence is automatic. No trial, no second chance. Agreed, Chen said. Agreed, Bonanno echoed. One by one, the other families voted. Even Antonio, though he looked like each word cost him, agreed to exile. Viktor stood, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. You'll regret this, Vitali. All of you. I'll rebuild, and when I return— You won't return? Alessandro said with utter certainty. Because if you do, you won't be facing just me. You'll be facing every family in this city, and there's nowhere you can run that we can't find you. It was done. Justice, not revenge. A choice made together, for a future instead of a past. But the day wasn't over. 3 hours later, in Alessandro's study, we received word that the Don had died, peacefully, in his sleep, just after dawn. He'd lived long enough to see his grandson make the right choice, to see the future he'd hoped for begin to take shape. The funeral was 3 days later, a massive affair attended by thousands, with politicians and judges and police chiefs rubbing shoulders with criminals and killers. The old Don had been respected, feared, and loved in equal measure. His loss left a void that everyone would spend years trying to fill. I stood beside Alessandro through all of it, holding his hand during the service, supporting him through the endless receiving line, being the partner he needed when grief threatened to overwhelm him. And when it was finally over, when the last guest had left, and the mansion was quiet again, we sat together in our bedroom, exhausted and grieving and alive. He knew, Alessandro said quietly. My grandfather. He knew when he gave me that envelope that I'd choose exile over execution. He was testing me one last time. Did you pass? I don't know. But I made the choice I can live with. We made that choice. Together, I confirmed. He turned to me, his dark eyes intense. I love you, Elena Vitali. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. You've given me something I never expected to have hope for, something beyond this life of violence and paranoia. Hope for a future where maybe, just maybe, I can be the man you see when you look at me. You're already that man, I said, kissing him softly. You just needed someone to help you see it. His arms came around me, pulling me close. And for a long moment we just held each other, two people who'd been thrown together by circumstance and found something real in the wreckage. What happens now? I asked. Now we build something new. The family is mine, truly mine, with my grandfather's blessing and the commission's approval. Antonio will challenge me eventually, but not yet. Not while I have the other family's support. He pulled back to look at me. And you finish nursing school. Work at the hospital like you wanted. Live the life you deserve. While being married to a mafia boss? While being married to a man who loves you. The mafia boss part is just unfortunate packaging. I laughed, the sound surprising me. A week ago, I'd been a waitress with dreams of a simple life. Now I was the wife of Chicago's most powerful crime lord, sitting in a mansion built on blood money, and somehow impossibly I was happy. I have a condition, I said. Another one? You promised me freedom when this was over. When your grandfather died and we could safely end the marriage. His face went carefully blank. Yes, I did. I want to renegotiate that condition. Hope flickered in his eyes, quickly suppressed. Renegotiate how? I don't want freedom from you. I want freedom with you. I want to choose this marriage every day, not because I'm trapped, but because I want to be here. With you, building whatever this is we're creating. Elena, let me finish. I know what your world is. I know the danger, the violence, the impossible choices. I know I'll see things that will haunt me, that loving you means living with fear every time you walk out that door. But I also know that you're worth it, that what we have is worth fighting for. He cupped my face with both hands, his thumbs stroking my cheeks, his expression raw with emotion. You're sure? Because once you make this choice, once you truly become part of this world, there's no going back. You'll be a target for my enemies. You'll carry the weight of the Vitali name. I'll have you, I interrupted. And you'll have me, that's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. He kissed me then, deep and searching, and I tasted promise in it, a future we'd build together, brick by careful brick. When we broke apart, I was breathless and certain. So, I said, trying for lightness despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. What does one do as the wife of a mafia boss, besides occasional gunfights and diplomatic negotiations with crime families? Alessandro laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Well, you could start by keeping me from making stupid decisions driven by ego and pride. I think I can manage that. And you could help me figure out what to do about the legitimate businesses my grandfather built alongside the illegal ones. He always wanted the family to go straight eventually. Maybe we can start that process. Laundering the family fortune into respectability? Something like that. Your grandfather refused to be corrupted. Maybe Lorenzo Russo's granddaughter can help uncorrupt what's been built. It was a beautiful dream. Impossible. Probably. But beautiful nonetheless. The idea that love could redeem, that two people could choose a different path than the one they'd been forced onto. There's one more thing, Alessandro said, suddenly serious. I need to tell you something about Marco and Antonio. My stomach tightened. What about them? They're the ones who leaked our location to the Bonanos, who told them about the sit-down at the restaurant. I have proof now. Dante found the communications 2 hours ago. What are you going to do? I'm going to offer them the same choice my grandfather offered me. Exile or death. A chance to walk away or face the consequences of their betrayal. He met my eyes. But I wanted to tell you first. To give you a chance to what? Object? Ask you to show mercy to the men who tried to have us killed? I shook my head. I'm not that naive, Alessandro. I know how this world works now. I know what betrayal costs. You're not angry that I'm giving them a choice instead of just eliminating them? I'm proud of you, I said honestly. A week ago, you would have just killed them. Now you're offering mercy you don't have to give. That's growth. That's the man you're becoming. He pulled me against him, holding me like I was precious, like I was the answer to questions he'd been asking his whole life. How did I get this lucky? He murmured into my hair. You didn't. You made a choice to be better, and the universe rewarded you with a stubborn nursing student who refuses to let you backslide. Best decision I ever made. Marrying me? Saying yes when my grandfather suggested it. Everything else has been inevitability. We sat there as the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and I thought about the strange path that had brought me here. A spilled glass of wine, a cruel woman's tantrum, a dangerous man's quiet observation, a dying dawn's desperate wish. All of it leading to this moment, this choice, this love that shouldn't exist but did anyway. I have something for you, Alessandro said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box different from the one that had held his mother's ring. I bought this yesterday, before everything with the commission, before my grandfather died. I wanted you to have it regardless of what you decided about staying. Inside was a delicate gold necklace, with a single pendant, a small compass rose, beautifully detailed. So you always know which way is home, he said quietly. No matter where this life takes you, no matter what dangers we face, you can always find your way back. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just turned around, letting him fasten it around my neck. The weight of it settled against my chest, warm and solid, a promise made in gold. Thank you, I finally managed. Thank you for choosing me. For choosing this. For seeing something worth saving in a man who thought he was beyond redemption. You were never beyond redemption, Alessandro. You were just waiting for someone to see you clearly. And you do? See me clearly? I see a man trying to honor his family while building something better. I see someone who offers mercy when revenge would be easier. I see my husband, who I love more than I thought possible. I turned back to face him. I see my future. He kissed me again, and this time it was different, not desperate or urgent, but certain. The kiss of two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and decided to stay. When we finally pulled apart, Alessandro rested his forehead against mine. I can't promise you it will be easy, he said. I can't promise we won't face more danger, more impossible choices. This world doesn't forgive weakness, and loving each other is the greatest weakness we could have. Then we'll be weak together, I said. And somehow, we'll make that our strength. Together. Always. Outside, the sun finished setting, plunging the room into twilight. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the city Chicago, with all its beauty and danger, its promise and threat. The city that had brought me from waitress to wife, From nobody to someone who mattered in ways I never expected. Alessandro stood, offering me his hand. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." I took his hand, my husband's hand, and let him lead me through the mansion to a room I'd never seen before. It was on the 3rd floor, facing east, with floor-to-ceiling windows that would catch the sunrise. "I had them set this up today," he said, opening the door. Inside was a study, but not like his. This one had medical textbooks lining the shelves, a desk with my laptop already set up, comfortable chairs, and good lighting. In the corner was a state-of-the-art anatomy model, and on the walls were beautiful anatomical drawings. "Your space," Alessandro said. "For studying, for planning your future at the hospital, for remembering that you're more than just my wife, you're Elena Russo Vitali, who's going to be an incredible nurse and save lives and make a difference in this city." I walked into the room, touching the books, the desk, the evidence of his faith in me. He'd given me this when he could have just offered me comfort and wealth. Instead, he'd given me purpose, identity, a future beyond the confines of his world. "Thank you," I whispered, tears streaming down my face, happy tears, grateful tears, tears for everything we'd survived and everything we were becoming. "Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll use it, that you'll finish school and become the nurse you dreamed of being, that you won't let my world consume all of who you are. I promise. If you promise not to let your world consume all of who you could be." Deal. We stood there in my new study, holding each other as the last light faded and the stars began to appear over Chicago. Two people who shouldn't work, who shouldn't have found each other, who by all rights should have destroyed each other. Instead, we'd saved each other. "I love you, Elena," Alessandro said into the darkness. "I love you too," I replied. "Unto death and beyond." That's a very dramatic declaration. I married a mafia boss. I'm allowed to be dramatic. His laugh echoed through the empty room, warm and real and free of the weight he usually carried. And in that moment, I knew we'd be okay. Not perfect, not without struggle or danger or heartbreak, but okay, together. Because love in the darkness, love built on honesty and choice and partnership, was stronger than any empire built on fear. And we would prove it, one day at a time, for as long as we both drew breath. Epilogue. 6 months later, I stood in the emergency room of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. My scrubs splattered with blood, my hair falling out of its ponytail, my body exhausted from a 12-hour shift. But I was smiling, because I'd just saved a life. A teenage boy with a gunshot wound, touch and go for 2 hours, but we'd pulled him through. I'd been the one to spot the internal bleeding, the one whose quick thinking had prevented disaster. I was a nurse now. I'd passed my boards 2 months ago, and Alessandro had thrown a party that rivaled our wedding. The entire medical staff at Northwestern had no idea their newest RN was married to one of the most powerful men in the city. I was just Elena Vitali to them, hardworking, dedicated, the woman who volunteered for the worst shifts and never complained. My phone buzzed with a text. "How was your shift?" "A saved a life." "Feels good." "E, my hero. Dante is out front whenever you're ready." "A, give me 20 minutes. Need to debrief with the attending." "E, take your time. I'm making dinner." A, I smiled at that. Alessandro had discovered he enjoyed cooking. It gave him something to do with his hands when he was stressed. Something that created rather than destroyed. He was actually pretty good at it, though he'd never admit it to anyone but me. Life had settled into a strange but wonderful routine. I worked at the hospital 3 days a week. Alessandro ran his empire. But with changes, legitimate businesses were expanding, illegal operations were slowly being phased out, and he'd started working with community organizations to provide alternatives to crime for young men in the neighborhoods he controlled. It was slow work, generational work, but it was progress. Victor had vanished into Europe, last seen in Prague, still bitter but smart enough to stay away. Antonio and Marco had chosen exile over death, relocating to Miami where they were someone else's problem. The Vitali family was healing, rebuilding under Alessandro's leadership, and we were happy. Impossibly, against all odds, happy. I finished my notes, changed out of my scrubs, and headed outside where Dante waited with the car. He greeted me with a nod of respect. We'd become friends of a sort. The man who'd once dragged me from my apartment, now one of my staunchest protectors. The drive home took 30 minutes through evening traffic. Home. I called it that now without irony. The mansion was home, with Alessandro in it. When I walked through the door, I found him in the kitchen, wearing an apron over his expensive suit, focused intently on something on the stove. He looked up when I entered, and his face transformed with his smile. "There's my wife," he said warmly. "Here I am. What's for dinner?" "Risotto. And before you ask, yes, I followed the recipe exactly. No improvising this time. You're learning. I have an excellent teacher." He pulled me close, kissing me thoroughly despite my protests that I was gross from work. How was the save? I told him about the surgery, about the teenager who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, about the moment when his vitals stabilized and I knew he'd make it. Alessandro listened with the same intensity he brought to everything, like my victories were as important as his business deals. "I'm proud of you," he said when I finished. "For doing my job? For being exactly who you said you'd be? For not letting my world change the core of who you are?" "It's changed me," I admitted. "I'm not the same woman who walked into this mansion 6 months ago." "No," he agreed. "You're stronger, fiercer, more certain of yourself. But you're still, Elena's still the woman who values life, who fights for people, who believes in redemption." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "Still the woman I love more than I thought possible." Smooth talker. I learned from the best. We ate dinner together at the small table in the kitchen. We rarely used the formal dining room anymore, preferring the intimacy of this space. Afterward, we walked out to the terrace overlooking the lake, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars reflect off the water. "I have news," Alessandro said quietly. My heart skipped. In our world, news was rarely simple. Good or bad? Good, I think. The commission has asked me to mediate a dispute between two families in New York. It's recognition they're acknowledging that what we're building here, this attempt at evolution, is worth respecting. That's wonderful. It means a week in New York, and I want you to come with me. Alessandro, I can't just... I already cleared it with your supervisor, called in a favor. You have the week off. He turned me to face him, his expression serious. I know you need your independence, your career, but I also need you beside me for this. Need your perspective, your strength. Please, how could I say no to that? How could I deny him when he asked so honestly, when he gave me everything and asked for so little in return? Okay, I said. New York. Together. Together, he echoed, and kissed me under the stars. Later that night, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets in our bedroom, we'd long since stopped pretending we needed separate wings. I thought about how far we'd come. From a forced marriage to a real partnership, from strangers to lovers, from survival to actually living. Elena? Alessandro's voice was drowsy, his arm heavy across my waist. Thank you. For what? For staying. For choosing this. For choosing me. I turned in his arms, pressing a kiss to his chest. Thank you for being worth choosing. He held me closer, and in the darkness, I felt completely safe, protected not just by his army of guards and walls of security, but by his love, by the choice we made every day to stay, to fight, to build something better. Outside, Chicago hummed with life, both light and dark, legal and illegal, beautiful and broken. Our city, our world, our future, and we would face it together, Alessandro Vitali and his unlikely wife, proving that even in the darkest places, love could take root and grow. That redemption wasn't just possible, it was worth fighting for. That sometimes, the most dangerous choice was also the right one, always together, until death and beyond.